It feels so refreshing to be able to sit down and talk about new Mushoku Tensei anime content. Like, it was a treat to be able to wake up and just see this glorious episode that came out. And just as usually any Mushoku Tensei episode is, this episode felt like 5 minutes. And it's sad because even though we know a season 2 is coming, like it's been announced now, and usually when those announcements come out, we can kind of speculate that it's going to come out very soon rather than later. It doesn't change the fact that, we still don't have a confirmed release date for Mushoku Tensei season 2, and so this is like the last bit of anime content for the series we're going to get for a good long while, maybe until the end of this year or even around in the next year. So even though it may not be that long from now, it still feels like a long way away because even these past 3 months without any new Mushoku Tensei content, it's felt very sad. Like, I have really missed this series, but I guess let's get all the doom and gloom out of the way. Let's talk about the fantastic nature that was this 21-minute episode of Mushoku Tensei, the OVA to be exact. Now, to kind of clarify a few things, if once again this is your first time ever hearing me talk about the OVA of Mushoku Tensei, this OVA takes place between episode 17 and episode 18, around the exact same time as when Paul and Rudy had their argument, which is why the OVA is titled like 17.5. So if you have yet to actually catch up, or at least watch up to episode 17 of Mushoku Tensei's anime, then I highly recommend you do so before you actually watch this OVA. That's where it's kind of positioned at. But if you've already finished the first season, then by all means, just watch the OVA because it doesn't matter. But anyways, let's get into the point. So just as any normal fashion for Mushoku Tensei, it opens up with a very, I guess, world-building, immersive setting. Like, the entire beginning sequence felt very different than most beginning sequences of Mushoku Tensei. Usually we have, like, a depiction of a town, we have a depiction of, the landscape, we got some of the interactions with the people in the world and all that, we get to see agriculture. That's normally the stuff we get to see at the beginning of an episode, and in a way, we did have something very similar when it came to the overall backstory of Cliff. I'm assuming the beginning sequence is Cliff's backstory, just judging by how it all ties in perfectly with what this episode was about. I do think that overall, when it comes to the beginning sequence, it was straight to the point, and it really told a story without holding anyone's hand, and let's kind of talk about that. So, in the light novel version of this story, it was very, very informative, very descriptive. It gave a lot more information to Cliff's backstory. Basically, if you were to sit down and read this extra chapter that was in the light novel, you would get all of the information just read to you about what was really going on in that opening sequence of this episode. However, the animators decided to do what they do usually best, and they did their own version. Basically, they didn't change anything, but they believed that the audience watching the episode would be able to follow along with imagery alone. Like, they wouldn't need to be handheld and told every little thing through words. They could follow along through just the way the images are displayed on screen. And I really love how Mushoku Tensei has always done this. It is something that I have praised for a very long time now. Ever since I really started reviewing the anime, I talked about how the animators of this series, they put in information through just the symbolism and the opening sequence without really having any dialogue. And it really puts a lot of faith in the audience. It really does. Because there's not a lot of stories that really allow you to, do that. For instance, there's a lot of animators or a lot of anime that's come out to where they give you a lot of exposition. And there could have been a whole narrator thrown in on the beginning of this OVA with Cliff narrating his entire backstory. That's what they could have done. They could have done something like that, but they didn't. And the reason for it is because they believed that, like I've already said, their audience would be able to understand Cliff's backstory through the few, I guess, pictures that they were showing. So let's talk about his backstory, what we got from the images. So it opens up with a sequence with a house or a shack in the middle of a giant field, and at first glances, this is very reminiscent of Rudy. Like, if you don't know who Cliff is, or before you watch the episode, it looks like the opening sequence of maybe something similar to Rudy, and how Rudy was born in this world. He was born in like a little shack basically in the middle of nowhere, like in a village. He was born in a very similar manner, and since it was just black silhouettes, you didn't really know if it was Rudy, Cliff, or whoever. And so as you keep seeing the scenes progress, eventually you see, the house on fire, you see a father kind of, groveling on the ground, raising his hand, and then you see knights to the side, and you see the father's hand just get completely chopped off, and you hear baby crying, which you could assume is Cliff, and then you just see it cut to the next image, where Cliff is by himself, wandering by himself, probably just journeying from village to village, basically as an orphan, and one day some rich individual, a noble that isn't fully clarified, appears, and they pick up Cliff, and then they teach him things. And as he is taught many different, tools and specialties, he eventually comes upon learning magic. You see a quick depiction of him using magic, and then people start to praise him. For instance, all the nobles or the rich people start to praise Cliff. And then as Cliff is sitting there all alone, he notices that people that are praising him and giving him happiness, etc., it put a smile on his face. He enjoyed being praised. He enjoyed people looking up to him saying, "You're excellent, you're amazing." He enjoyed that. You could just tell by the overall expression that was displayed in the imagery. But then as you see him sitting and he's looking out a window, he looks at adventurers passing on by, and you could see just the envy in his face. Like, he wishes he could do that. He wishes he could join a party. He wishes that he could be an adventurer and be a part of something. And that's kind of the general backstory you can get from the opening sequence before, the opening song plays. I really like that. Like I said, there's not many series or a lot of animators and staff working on something that places that much faith in their audience to get that type of information without dialogue. Because like I said, the animators could have easily have thrown in a narrator with Cliff to make it obvious it was Cliff, that, that's his backstory, and they could have had him narrate the entire thing, but they didn't, and I appreciate that. I love it when a series respects my intelligence and allows me to get things on my own, because you can put everything together. As the episode progresses and you find out more about Cliff and how he's someone that really loves magic, or he feels like he's special because of how much magic he knows, you could kind of tie it into the opening sequence, and the way he keeps talking about his magic, it's like he wants Eris to praise him. He wants Eris to say that he's an excellent mage and that he is above normal individuals. That's kind of what you can get from his character. He wants to be praised. So it's, like I said, it's a beautiful start to an episode. Easily a great way to kind of get back into the swing of things of Mushoku Tensei. So let's go a little bit deeper. So obviously, besides the opening, you have the entire scene with, depicting the town that we're currently in, which is the same exact town where Rudy and Paul had their argument, this holy city, pretty much. And you see Eris just venturing on, doing her own thing, and she eventually, winds up and sees, like, some discrimination going on in the entire city, where demons or demi-humans aren't really allowed in certain buildings. They're kind of cast out. This is kind of what the establishing opening really gives us. Like, demi-humans aren't wanted here. Demons are not wanted here. And if we kind of trace our steps and go back to the earlier sections of Mushoku Tensei, Eris's journey, she was on a journey with a bunch of demons, a lot of demi-humans. She even has technically a demon on her side journeying with her, Ruijerd. So when you think about the entire beginning, it lets us know that this city is not really open to others, and you see this entire line and people having to pay this extra tax toll because they aren't actually human. They're demi-humans or demons. And it's fascinating because it lets us see kind of how this town is from a different perspective, because we didn't really have a lot of time to dive into this city, because once again, as a reminder, when we really came full swing into this city, we got into the whole debate and dispute and argument with Rudy and Paul, and there wasn't a lot of time to really explore the city. There wasn't a lot of time to see what was really going on in this city. And so when we watch this OVA, it gives us that perspective that was much needed. For instance, that clarification, that world building, and see how much different this city is from the others that we've been in so far at this very point. And as the episode carries on, I do like how that beginning sequence with the discrimination stuff ties back into the plot with, this assassination attempt going on with this princess, from what you can see, and she's apparently tied in with, demi-human demon rights going on within the city. So everything kind of comes back together, and it's a very close-knitted story throughout this quick episode. Now, obviously, there's a lot more questions and a lot more things that we don't really have answered, obviously, from this episode, but it's clear as day the reason why this was skipped. This content content of this episode was skipped was for two reasons. For one, it didn't fit the overall tone and vibe of the anime at the time, as I've talked about many times. But also, this content is probably something for the future, not something that was relevant at the time for the anime, and this was something that's probably going to appear in Season 2, or something that's going to appear in Season 3, if there is a Season 3. There is a lot of content that's probably just being built up for the future, and Cliff's entire character seems like a character that's going to be built up for the future, something very important way off in the future, just judging by his interactions he had with Eris throughout the episode. So let's talk about Eris, since I've just mentioned her. Eris has a whole journey throughout this episode. You can basically say she's the MC of this episode, along with Cliff. He is also technically an MC, and we get to see just how much respect she has for Rudy, which we knew, but to really just see her put her entire heart on the table and just talk about Rudy to such a degree, being very happy and smiling, and Cliff himself just gets dazed by it towards the end, it makes the ending sequence of Mushoku Tensei, the final episode, hit so much harder when the whole group had to split up, where Rudy went his own way, Eris went her own way, when Ruiger went his own way. It really makes that final sequence hit a lot harder because of just how much praise that Eris really gave him. There's just so much about it. And I really like how this episode, you can get a lot from it, despite it really just being a closed story about Eris killing goblins and meeting a person called Cliff. That's really, if I want to summarize the episode, that's exactly what it is. But obviously, there's a lot more going on here. It might be a small little puddle, but it's a very deep puddle. It's a very deep puddle with a lot of content you could just pull directly out of it. And I like that. That's one of the big things why I always get immersed into this series and why I talk about it so much, is because of all the content that can be thrown into such a short time frame. So, let's talk about the situation with the Pope and the princess and all that. So, there is an ongoing dispute in the city where this princess is a blessed child, which kind of plays in with some of the things we saw towards the ending of Mushoku Tensei Season 1 with blessed children, etc. And the princess is a part of that. Now, we don't really know the full-on relationship that she has with Cliff, but it's clear as day with Cliff putting on the helmet that he was related to her in some way. He knows her because he was hiding his identity, and he's also called Master Cliff towards the end. And if we look at the opening sequence with like the paintings and stuff, we know that he's a part of royalty or nobles. We don't really know if he's a runaway. We don't know exactly what's going on there, but he definitely is well known. And so he was hiding his face. And so he, from what we can get, is on the opposing side of the princess. Like, he's on a completely different faction, and he's against whatever the princess is trying to do. But the way the episode tries to paint it, it seems like Cliff is trying to fight for demon and demi-human rights, while the princess isn't really fighting for those rights. That's at least what you can get, but obviously it's very muddled. We don't really know the whole story in both sides, and it's not really properly conveyed because obviously this is probably stuff to be expanded upon at a later date, maybe through another OVA or through a continuation follow-up with Season 2, Season 3. That's the point. So, it's a good episode. I think that overall, this fits the tone of Mushoku Tensei, and it's very immersive. And I have to say, one of my favorite sequences of the episode, if I had to talk about it, is that action sequence with Eris, which, holy crap, that was a violent sequence. Like, she just split a guy in half, and when she just started, zooming around swords and stuff, it was crazy. Like, the animators of that scene really went all in. It looked beautiful. Like, words cannot even begin to describe how beautiful that entire action sequence was. It's just like, man, you could tell the people that work on this really love this series, and I can't wait for it to return. But overall, I guess, once again, all good things must come to an end. It's, like I said, it's a short, quick episode, but it's a beautiful episode, and I can't wait to see where all of these events with Cliff's introduction and the rights with the Pope and demi-human and demons and stuff start popping up again within the story. But for now, I guess I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for anyone that tuned in and watched this video. I greatly appreciate it, and if you enjoyed this video, leave me a like. If you want more of my content to appear in your YouTube feed, then please click that subscribe button down below. And with that, guys, be safe, stay healthy, Chibi out.